Okay, so let's dive into the beautiful and, let's be honest, often misunderstood world of Islamic mysticism. We're talking about Sufism. It's a spiritual path that has captivated people for centuries, but for a lot of us, what it really is gets kind of lost in translation.
You've probably seen quotes just like this one from the 13th century poet Rumi. I mean, they're everywhere, right? On posters, on Instagram, at weddings, and they make him seem like this universal teacher of love, sort of floating free from any one religion.
Well, to really get Rumi, to understand where those incredible insights came from, we have to go way deeper than those popular quotes. We actually have to travel back in time to a world that was already ancient by the time he was born. And believe it or not, our journey starts with a scholar, not a poet.
Right. So our story really kicks off in the 11th century with one of the most important thinkers in all of Islamic history, a man named Al-Ghazali. His life, his work, it basically set the stage for mystics like Rumi to flourish right in the heart of the mainstream Islamic world.
And listen, that title, The Proof of Islam, that wasn't just some fancy nickname. Al-Ghazali was an absolute giant, a master of law, theology, philosophy, you name it. He was the head professor at the most prestigious university in Baghdad. I mean, this guy was, quite literally, the definition of success in his day. But his entire life was about to get turned upside down.
Just think about this for a second. In 1095, at the absolute peak of his career, Al-Ghazali has a total spiritual breakdown. He looks at his life and realizes all his fame, all his status, it was all just feeding his ego, and it wasn't actually getting him any closer to God. So, he gives it all up. He walks away from everything and spends the next 10 years in seclusion, following the mystical path of Sufism.
And what Al-Ghazali did was incredible. He brought this mystical path right into the center of mainstream Islam. He argued that true faith wasn't just about intellectual knowledge. It also needed that direct personal experience. But what exactly is Sufism?
Now here's the really crucial thing to get. Sufism is not a separate religion. It's not a sect. Think of it as the inner dimension of Islam. So while some focus on the outer laws and rituals, which are important, Sufis are focused on the inner work, purifying the soul to feel a direct, personal, experiential connection with God.
And this brings us to the central, kind of mind-bending concept in Sufism called fana. It's often translated as annihilation, and they describe it as dying before you die. The whole idea is to let go of that false self, the ego, with all its wants and fears, so that what's left is just a pure vessel, a clean mirror that can perfectly reflect the presence of God. For a Sufi, that is the ultimate goal.
And this journey isn't just some vague, random spiritual quest. The Sufi path, or tariqa, is actually highly structured. You have the seeker, the murid, who pledges themselves to a spiritual guide, the murshid. And that guide's authority isn't just self-proclaimed. No way. It comes from an unbroken chain of teachers, a silsila, that goes all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad himself, ensuring the teachings stay pure and authentic.
Okay, so with all of that in mind, this structured, deeply Islamic mystical path, let's go all the way back to where we started, with the poet Jalaluddin Rumi. Because once you understand Sufism, you start to see his poetry in a completely new and honestly a much more authentic light.
And this is where things get really fascinating. Look at this. The version on the left is the one we all know, right? It sounds so beautiful and universal, but the version on the right is way closer to what Rumi actually wrote in Persian. You see, he's not talking about some vague idea of right and wrong. He's talking specifically about Islamic concepts of what's holy and what's forbidden. A lot of the most popular translations in the West kind of scrub out these specific Islamic references to make the poems more universal, sure, but in doing that, they actually change the entire meaning.
And look, you don't have to take my word for it. Rumi himself was crystal clear about who he was. He was a devout Sunni Muslim, a top-tier scholar and theologian, and a Sufi master. His poetry wasn't a rejection of his religion. It was a deep, passionate dive into its mystical heart, and the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad were always his guides.
But this isn't just ancient history. Sufism is a living, breathing tradition today. It's a vibrant, global path, followed by millions and millions of people from West Africa to South Asia and everywhere in between. But it's also a highly contested one.
Yeah, you might think a path focused on love and divine connection would be embraced by everyone, but that is just not the case. Within the Muslim world, some extremist groups see Sufi practices, like visiting the shrines of saints or using music and worship, as corruptions of the faith. This has led to accusations of heresy and, tragically, to horrific violence.
And these are just a few chilling recent examples. A bomb at a packed shrine in Pakistan, a massacre at a mosque in Egypt, the targeted murder of a beloved musician. It's a stark reminder that, for so many people around the world today, following this path of mystical love isn't just a spiritual choice, it's an act of profound courage.
So, let's go back to that final question. Does knowing the deep Islamic roots of Sufism somehow diminish the universal appeal of Rumi's poetry? Honestly, I think it does the exact opposite. It enriches it. It's like finding the deep, ancient spring that feeds a beautiful river. It doesn't make the water any less refreshing, it just makes you appreciate its depth, its power, and its true source all the more.